Well, welcome to the 700 Club. If you can believe it, the Middle East is still under a ceasefire. But the conflict continues. A U.S. warship fired on an Iranian cargo vessel in the Strait of Hormuz, while 2 Israeli soldiers died in Lebanon.
President Trump says U.S. negotiators are headed to Pakistan for another round of talks, even though the Iranians have not confirmed they'll be there. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has the story.
The U.S. took control of an Iranian cargo ship that attempted to break the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz over the weekend. President Trump wrote on Truth Social that the U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer USS Spruance intercepted the Tuska in the Gulf of Oman and gave them fair warning to stop. The Iranian crew refused to listen, so our Navy stopped them right in their tracks by blowing a hole in their engine room. Right now, the U.S. Marines have custody of the vessel. A French shipping company says Iran fired warning shots at one of its vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran closed the strait again on Saturday, less than 24 hours after declaring it open. Oil prices are rising due to the standoff. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said gas prices likely won't keep rising, but it will take time for them to go back down. President Trump announced Vice President Vance, along with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, will be back in Pakistan for a new round of talks with Iran scheduled for Tuesday, but Iran says it has no plans to attend. In a social media post, Trump says if Iran refuses the deal he's laid out, he'll destroy every power plant and no more Mr. Nice Guy. Asked if destroying bridges and power plants is a war crime, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, pointed out Iran's culpability.
The Iranian regime in particular and its terrorist proxies have a long history of actually deliberately hiding military infrastructure in hospitals, schools, neighborhoods, and other civilian assets. So they are they have no ground to stand on.
As Middle Easterners ponder the situation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it's a time of great challenge and great consequence.
We have achieved enormous things. It's not over yet. And any moment could bring us new developments.
The IDF released a map showing it's reestablishing the security zone in southern Lebanon. Israel maintained a security zone there for 18 years to protect residents of northern Israel before withdrawing 26 years ago. Despite the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, Hezbollah fired on UNIFIL peacekeepers, killing a French soldier and wounding 3 others. 2 IDF soldiers were also killed over the weekend in separate incidents in Lebanon. Israel said on Monday during the ceasefire, Hezbollah has continued its terrorist activity in violation of the agreement. Accordingly, the IDF remains deployed in the defensive area. It's also warning civilians to stay away from certain areas. Israel says it's killed more than 1,800 Hezbollah terrorists during Operation Roaring Lion, more than 250 of them in the 24 hours before the ceasefire took effect. Overnight, the IDF said it struck a loaded and ready-to-fire launcher in southern Lebanon, north of the forward defense line, in order to prevent a direct threat to the communities of northern Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
It is amazing to me to hear the UN, to hear the so-called progressive left try to bring up war crimes in the middle of this conflict, as if there wasn't a standard for Hamas, there wasn't a standard for Iran, but there has to be a standard on the other side. In this asymmetric war, Iran had no problem going after apartment complexes, after power plants, after civilian infrastructure. Hamas clearly had war crimes. They used rape as a method of warfare. But you're not hearing anyone talk about that in the context of the current conflict. It just makes no sense to me that what they began, there's some kind of international pressure now, or pressure from our own media, our own news sources, that somehow we have to not return what they've done to us. It's also amazing that as Israel is forced to reestablish this security zone, the UN isn't taking responsibility for their failure. It was UN troops. As part of that withdrawal, there was a deal where the UN would step in and the UN would maintain that peace and keep Hezbollah out. But as we've seen, Hezbollah tunnels are right under the watchtowers of the UN bases. Let us not let truth be stood on its head anymore. Let's not let them get away with these lies that they continue to make. It's the propaganda machine out of Hamas and out of Iran is truly incredible. Let us stand for the truth that, no, you don't get to do this on our watch. And I pray, and I hope you're praying, that the government of the United States and the government of Israel sees this through to the end, that Hezbollah should no longer exist in Lebanon, Hamas should no longer exist in Gaza, and the regime of clerics in Iran is no more. When we see that, well, then we can have some kind of measured peace in the Middle East. In other news, high oil prices are generating economic consequences far beyond the gas tank. John Jessup has that story and more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That is right, Gordon. Concern is growing here at home about the impact of high prices on mortgage rates and the already strained housing market. CBN Washington correspondent Jenna Browder explains.
What's happening thousands of miles away could hit much closer to home, right in homebuyers' wallets.
There are some pretty far-reaching ripple effects here.
As the Iran conflict drives up oil prices, economists warn that could keep inflation stubbornly high, which affects the housing market. Elevated inflation makes the Federal Reserve less likely to cut interest rates, and in some cases could raise them. The domino effect hits mortgage rates, which have already been hovering near multi-year highs.
Oil prices are a key input in all of this because oil touches so many aspects of the economy. Obviously, what we put in our cars, air travel, these are some of the direct impacts, but there are a lot of indirect impacts. Really transporting goods from point A to point B throughout the supply chain. Higher oil prices can really force inflation higher across the economy. And then when inflation is higher, of course, the Fed needs to keep rates higher to try to clamp down on that, but it just has ripple effects throughout.
Markets began reacting to the warfare in Iran right from the start. Higher oil prices pushed up government bond yields, the key driver of mortgage rates, making borrowing more expensive. The result? A housing market that had just started to show signs of relief for buyers has begun tightening again. Higher mortgage rates mean higher monthly payments, pricing out some buyers and keeping others on the sidelines.
As recently as February, we thought there could be 2, maybe 3 cuts this year. We actually saw the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate briefly go below 6% in February for the first time in about 3.5 years. And there was a feeling that maybe it could go as low as about 5.5, and that would spur some people to get in off the sidelines. Now a lot of that momentum has reversed. So whether we're talking housing or car loans, credit card rates, things like that, borrowing could remain costlier for the balance of the year.
Ted Rossman with Bankrate tells CBN News the uncertainty is slowing home sales. Numbers from the National Association of Realtors show sales in March down about 3.5% month over month and about 1% year over year. Those sales hitting a 9-month low last month.
Some of the optimism that we had for the 2026 housing market back in February has been dampened quite a bit.
Oil prices dipped slightly following news of a temporary ceasefire, although analysts cautioned the volatility isn't going away. And as long as global instability keeps pressure on energy prices and inflation, lower mortgage rates could be out of reach. Even small shifts in mortgage rates can make a huge difference for home buyers. So until inflation cools and things slow down globally, experts say to not expect much meaningful relief. Jenna Browder, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Jenna. Well, increased travel costs mean spring break destinations like Cancun are seeing a drop in tourists this year. That hasn't stopped one international Christian ministry from carrying out its annual gospel outreach. As CBN's Lori Johnson shows us, the beaches are still ripe for the harvest.
People partying in Cancun and Playa del Carmen may look like they're having a good time, but deep down, many are longing for more.
He shared with me how his mother had recently died because of alcoholism. He shared how he was now responsible for 2 siblings, and he had a beer in his hand the whole time. And I just listened to him, started to share a little bit about Jesus and how Jesus sees him and how he loves him. And in the middle of our conversation, he took his beer, he dumped it all out on the beach, and said he wants to give his life to Jesus.
Scott Langemeyer led a recent 10-day mission to the area known for attracting spring break crowds.
The evangelists focused on Cancun hotspots, high traffic areas, including the beach and the main tourism strip.
Really believe that Jesus wants to meet people, and there's a lot of people today who aren't quickly going to go to a church, but we as the global church can go to them.
48 evangelists traveled here from Latin America, the U.S., and Europe, like Ricarda, who's from Switzerland.
I was on the beach yesterday at night, and I saw a woman there, but she's so sad in her life, what's happened. And so I asked her if I can pray for her, and she told me, yes, please. And I prayed, and she was so touched, and she told me that it was the first time that a person prayed for her. And now she's open to learn more about God.
The evangelists learn as they go.
We don't really know each other before we arrive. And in the morning, we have a time of worship. We have trainings where we try to give practical tools to how we can share the gospel. A lot of people who come, it's maybe the first time that they've ever even done something like this.
In 10 days, they baptized 22 people and planted many seeds.
Yesterday in Playa del Carmen, I met a man, and we actually were able to invite him to a church, and we prayed for him, and he had tears in his eyes, and we hope that he will go all in with Jesus.
In addition to tourists, the group reached locals too.
Even in the hotel as we were training, the staff could tell that there was something different about us. And one night they actually invited us to do a program for the entire hotel. And so we were able to do it right there to share the gospel too with other people who were staying. It was really special to see how in aspects we weren't even expecting, God opening up new doors.
Langemeyer says many Christians would be less afraid to share the gospel if they witness someone who resists at first get saved, like this man.
He ended up getting on his knees right there on the beach, confessing his sin and saying he needs forgiveness. He wants to be free. He's tired of these burdens that he's carrying. And shortly after, we baptized him. And the next night, he came back, and he invited his father to come back. And he even picked up Bibles that we were sharing, and he was sharing them with other people as well.
This is Reach Cancun's third year, and plans are already in place for 2027. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Spring break unlike anything I've ever seen before. Gordon, over to you.
Well, that's marketplace evangelism in action. The Apostle Paul would do that. He would go to gathering places, whether that's philosophers at Mars Hill in Athens or on the streets of Corinth. He went to the resort town, the sin capital of the Greek world, and started a church there. That is true evangelism. If you think inviting people to church, that's a good thing to do. But if that's all there is, well, you're missing it. You can take the gospel into your workplace, into the marketplace, and into aisle 3 in your grocery store. Wherever you see people that are hurting and in need of the gospel, well, that's precisely the time to open up and say, well, I've got a better way. I know a Savior who can come and help you right now.